Students are going to use AI, whether you allow them to do it or not. Wouldn't you rather, work with the students on what's acceptable, what's ethical? We have a responsibility to educate our students so that they're prepared for jobs. The way that AI is influencing our direction forward is happening at a faster rate, something that we've never seen before.
Dr. Dempsey, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really exciting for me to be here at the PennWest Center for Artificial Intelligence and Emerging Technologies here in the Baron Forness Library. I grew up in Erie, Pennsylvania, and, as a debater in high school, I debated in the 1980s. We actually had to go to the library to do our research. So I would visit the various university libraries around the area, including Edinburgh, which, this is now the Edinburgh campus of Penn West. Many of those debates that I had here were against Dr. Anand Rao, who was a student at Fairview High School in Erie, Pennsylvania at the time.
There are a lot of great connections here. Not only do we have that connection with Erie, but I also started my first position as a professor at Clarion University, which is also now part of Penn West. So really interesting connections with the Erie, with Edinburgh, with Clarion and Penn West. And so we're excited to hear about some of those connections as well. I'm so glad we have the opportunity to talk with you, Dr. Dempsey, about your work, about the new Center for Artificial Intelligence and Emerging Technologies. So let's begin by letting you speak to some of those connections as well. Tell us a bit about what brought you to Penn West, and what are you enjoying most about being at Edinburgh and in Erie?
Yeah, so I was a classroom teacher for quite a while before moving into higher ed, and I never would have dreamed that I would be in the role that I'm in. In fact, when I was young, I went to Tech Memorial High School here in Erie, and I can remember my brother being the one who was into, technology computers, building computers. So I fell in love with, believe it or not, the arts first, worked with kids from, K to 12 and just really loved doing that for a long time. And then it wasn't until I started at a university, I was invited to join a university that's in our area and worked there for a while and then evolved into the technology area. So I was the one that people would call on to help them with tech. And so I went back to school. So I went back to do my doctorate, and that was in educational technology. So it's been a natural progression from being a teacher to, being a professor. So, but I wouldn't have predicted it. It's been an interesting journey for sure.
Yeah, your upcoming book really seems to blend the arts and the tech. Once upon a chatbot, fairy tales about artificial intelligence. What inspired you, to take this creative approach to AI? And, what hope do you have for the readers to take from it?
Yeah, so I have been watching the landscape, and there are like the whole world is writing books about AI, right? And my concern is that a lot of the books, and I have a lot of them in my library, just for historical purposes. But my concern is a lot of the books will be out of date like next month, and so I really didn't want to write a book that would go that direction. So I thought, well, if I wrote a book, how first of all, who would I want the audience to be? And so my audience is everyone. I wanted it to be really down to earth. I thought if I put it in the format of a fairy tale, it would be easier for people to understand what AI is without using, big words that, a lot of people it kind of turns them off. So yeah, and I've been thinking about I can illustrate the books myself, but I'm sort of thinking about using AI, or at least like a combination of AI with doing them by hand, like some kind of a hybrid approach to doing the illustrations. But that part I'm still sitting on. So yeah, I think the art part of my background definitely will influence what I'm doing, but the writing's been super fun.
That's great. We can't wait to see it when it comes out. So you described AI as one of the largest technology innovations of our time, followed by the internet and mobile devices. Could you elaborate on what you think makes AI fundamentally different from previous educational technologies?
Yeah, some people think that AI is the next industrial revolution. I think that it's more than that. First of all, I think that like artificial intelligence and the way that things are shifting. In my research, I call it the virtuality culture. So, like the way that AI is influencing our direction forward is happening at at a faster rate, something that we've never seen before. So just like the internet disrupted, our culture and mobile devices have disrupted our culture, AI is absolutely doing that, but it's doing it in a more rapid, robust way. So we've never, I don't know, I don't think anybody's ever seen anything like this. I know I haven't. Just the momentum and looking at what's happening, even in the state of Pennsylvania with these centers, right? Like down in Philly, and they're moving across the state. Like our governor just talked about it. I think we're going to see a whole lot more, and I think the fact that we have AI running nuclear power plants is in Pennsylvania's calling that like the clean energy, right? Like I'm curious to see like what that's going to look like. So I certainly can't think of any other technology that can run a nuclear power plant. So there you go.
When I was a kid, I grew up during the 3 Mile Island scare. So,
Yes.
and I didn't fully understand it what was going on because I was quite young. I remember it was lower elementary school, but definitely bring back some memories. But in terms of the momentum you described, right? We're seeing that. Some of the research I've done, I've kind of been documenting some of this rise, and the PennWest Center for AI and emerging technologies, you officially opened it, right? Like in April of 2025. So this probably came together like, pretty quickly, especially as how things change, right? Educational environments usually don't see rapid change, right? So November 2022, the end of November, we see ChatGPT hit the world. AI, explodes into the public consciousness. There's all this discussion about it. And then pretty quickly, right, basically about 2.5 years later, your center here opens up. So I'm kind of wondering if you could talk about like the vision behind the center, how the support for it arose, what role you played, how did everything happen here? I will say in educational time, very, very, very quickly.
Right. Yeah. Especially for higher ed, right? Higher ed doesn't always move very quickly, but we definitely are moving. I had been doing a ton of consulting outside of the university. So I teach the educational technology courses here, or at least I was teaching a full load before I became the director. And so a lot of the AI aspects in education I was bringing into my classes, but I had just been to Morocco and done some professional development training for professors and like all over the state and all over the country doing things. So our provost VP, he's got both roles, asked for a meeting with me, and this was last fall. And I thought, okay, am I in trouble? What's going on? And he said, no, no, no. I just want to understand more about this AI thing. And it's funny because everyone sort of says that when they are getting started, like, tell me about this AI thing. So he took me to a local bagel shop, Lakeside Bagels, and we sat and just, talked about some of the things I was working on. And then he asked me in the last 5 minutes of the conversation, we met about an hour, last 5 minutes of the conversation, how do we bring what you do outside to Penn West? And so off the top of my head, I just rattled off a bunch of ideas. And then before I knew it, he said to me, well, so if you were going to do what you do outside here, what would you need? Like, what would happen? So I rattled off. This was all in the last 5 minutes. That we would need some sort of a center, that we would need, someone would need to be a director, someone, there'd need to be funding, and I mean, I just rattled that off. So within that 5 minutes at the end, he said, Okay, so you're hired like how when are we going to make this happen? So I thought, okay, this is whoa. All right. So I started working last fall and then it evolved into the spring, which is when we launched it. So yeah, I wouldn't have dreamed this up. I mean, it just kind of like came up in a meeting and a lot of the interest I have in this center is we have vast areas around us that are rural, right? And you always hear about AI in the urban environments and how big research, centers, universities and so forth are doing things. And I thought, well, this is a real opportunity to help not only our urban area, right here with Erie and down near Pittsburgh, but also to help support all the rural, like what they call the rural areas. And so the vision behind it, just to kind of, keep this short, is that we're really looking at preparing not only our students, faculty, and our staff with AI, but helping our community partners in leading and innovating in their areas. And we want to emphasize the responsible use of AI and emerging technologies. We do have that side of the house as well. Like it's not just AI, there's other areas, but and that really takes this initiative with credentialing and research and community engagement and strategic partnerships. So we've started, working with places. I haven't had to go after anybody. Everyone's coming to us like, oh, we hear you, you've got this AI center. So we see ourselves as a hub, being dynamic and inclusive and helping, like I said, all of those stakeholders that I just talked about. And we have quite a few priorities, but that's kind of it for the vision.
That's
Yeah, I mean, a few
fantastic. Well,
things. Oh.
sorry, Stefan, go ahead. Yeah.
I'd say a few things stand out. Well, one is universities can move quickly when they want to, right? It's possible. It's really possible to move quickly. The second thing that stands out is, you say you're really helping the entire area, right? People talk a lot about, oh, the quote unquote crisis in higher ed and, enrollment and, the role of universities. And, you've built this center and you're attracting, right? All this interest. I know before we started the podcast, you were telling me you started working with some local businesses who wanted to learn about AI. You're supporting all the school districts in the area, including, I drove by a couple to come out here, some rural school districts. So you're really, you're bringing a lot of visibility to the university, and you're performing a really important role in the community. And in the way you started too, with the consulting and like you said in Morocco and some other places in the state, you also see what everyone else is doing, right? So it's not even limited to the ideas that you have here. You're able to bring in and think about ideas from everywhere. But Anand, you were gonna.
Well, I was going to say, if you could talk to us a little bit about some of those key priorities in the center, which of these have been most challenging to implement? Have any of them generated maybe the most enthusiasm, or it sounds like a lot of the constituencies are already coming forward and asking you for support and for direction. Tell us about some that really stand out.
Well, with something so new and I think disruptive, you're always going to have people that are, sort of deer in the headlights, right? Like, oh, we don't know how this is going to affect us. Is this going to change the whole university structure and the way that we function? And I mean, this really is a huge shift with PennWest, and we're talking about all three campuses. So even though we have a physical center on the Edinburgh campus, we have faculty involved from all three, and that's been pretty important. So, I mean, as far as thinking about priorities, and then I can talk about some of the challenges and successes. I think one of the things is helping faculty to understand that AI isn't going away, that no matter what they choose to be involved in or to what extent, that we have a responsibility to educate our students so that they're prepared for jobs. And one of the things, I think one of the challenges as far as building capacity is that I've been contacted by businesses who say to me, Camille, we're looking for students who can, use AI in, whatever their organization is, but we also want students that can train all of our staff, which is a whole other, like, I mean, if you're in computer science, for example, like I hear that that's like 2 degrees, right? Like leadership on the other side. But so even though that sounds like an unrealistic expectation, I think on our side of the house, we need to be preparing students to think that way. That okay, you're going to use AI in your job, or and just know that you're probably going to help them to figure that out, right? So that's one challenge. But then the second piece is you're also going to need to stretch and push yourself to help everybody else. And so we have a lot of professors who are involved with AI, who are learning and researching. We started, we started with 9 communities of practice for faculty and staff to learn about AI, explore together, share things, add ideas. It's almost like little mini think tanks, and that's been really neat. So those faculty are prepared, right? Or they're becoming more prepared with helping students. But we still have faculty that I'm looking for, that I'm saying, hey, students are going to use AI, whether you allow them to do it or not. Wouldn't you rather, work with the students on what's acceptable, what's ethical, and help them to understand their world? So, I mean, that's a opportunity, but it's also a challenge. We have a huge challenge in that we have so many needs. There are so many needs, particularly outside of our university. I know I get calls every week, like, Camille, can you do this training or do that training? And we have faculty that are now doing some of that as well. So they're feeling more comfortable, they're feeling competent and um, confident. So, I think this whole shift, as things are shifting with teaching, this whole paradigm shift, it's new for everyone. So that's challenging for many reasons. It's also exciting for many reasons. But I mean, those are a few things that that I can offer based on the priorities.
Well, and it sounds like that one of those initiatives that you've already started with the AI and Technology Student Ambassadors Program helps address a number of those concerns at once. I mean, that seems like a really efficient and time sensitive way of not only working on developing the skills for the students, but making sure they're ready to be able to take that out and to share it with others, addressing some of the needs that the employers are talking about, the faculty are talking about. Could you say a little bit more about this initiative? How are they leading these educational efforts? What unique perspectives do they bring to the work? Is there something about having a student offering that education that may be different than a faculty member?
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't know what the interest level would be when we started that initiative. So we had an application, basically asked, why would we consider them? And we had, I believe the first round was 34 students and we took everyone.
Wow.
Because I thought if they're interested, then that means that they're already primed for whatever it is that we're all going to do. And by the way, these are students in every area, like from education. I think education was the top. We had the most students from education, and computer science and information systems. But we also had students in art therapy and sports management and like areas that you wouldn't necessarily think of. So it shows that this is impacting everyone, right? So that as far as the initiative, I think at first they didn't know what to do. It was like someone needed to tell them, like, no, you're the leaders for the university, for the students. So we'll have students this fall doing professional development for faculty and students from their perspective, which I am totally in love with. We started slow this past spring just because there were so many things being launched. They've had one training. I'll do another training with them in the fall that focuses mostly on ethical AI and thinking about, how to lead. What are some ways that they can lead? Because I think, a lot of them are undergrads, so they need a little help. But it also attracted master's and doctoral students. So we have students across the board. But yeah, we'll see what they do. I know so far we've had students that have presented at conferences on AI. We had a couple students that competed at the Frederick Douglass State debates, which Stefan will appreciate. And it was cute. I had two sophomores who I coached. It was the first time I've ever coached anybody in a debate, and they ended up winning second in the state. And the topic was should the pass these schools should they mandate the use of AI? So they did really well. In fact, one of them he was just shocked that he couldn't believe he won second place. He said, "I've never done this in my life." So. Yeah, I mean, I think there's the opportunity with the ambassadors for them to choose what, like we're not going to mandate that, but to choose what it is they want to get involved in. But we'll have expectations, for things that they do, but they'll still have a lot of choice. And they'll also influence, like when I talked to them in the spring, it was about influencing other students that might, not really know what the right way to do things are. And then also the professors who, if they're bold enough to debate some things with them, that might be kind of fun.
Well, to bring it back to debate, of course, I really think debate is a great way to help facilitate the conversation about AI because, it is hard, right? Sometimes with teachers or professors, and obviously, like you're communicating the message of, hey, AI is here, right? You're not really going to control, like you were saying, like whether the students use it. But I also think it's important for people to really kind of talk about it, right? To talk about their concerns or to talk about ethical issues which may manifest themselves, in different classes, depending on the type of instructions or different ways that it's used in society. And I find too, of course, when you debate, it does kind of force you to think about a little bit what other people are saying, even if you don't want to admit in the debate that, people are using it. So to me, it's pretty exciting that we're starting to see, debate kind of used as a means of discussion. And of course, as I say, if AI can write the papers, then have the students debate. But the kind of the follow-up question I wanted to think, I know, you obviously, you're talking about, the process of getting this started, right? It was almost like a startup, right? It's like a couple of people, sitting in the bagel shop and the coffee shop, toss around some ideas, and then you launched the center and you talked about some of the things that you have done immediately. But I'm wondering if now that it's launched, right, and you have students and faculty involved, you started thinking of, okay, like, 2 years from now or 3 years from now, this is what we want to accomplish. And, maybe some more concrete ways, as you spin out the ambassador programs and you get kids going into the community. Have you thought about any type of, I had this idea, a couple of years ago, maybe even, give somebody some type of like a certificate, right? Like, and there may be different, criteria, right? And I like, oh, you've actually done some stuff in practice, you demonstrated, some mastery, so to speak, of these technologies. You've participated in these things on campus. So just thinking, if you thought about the goals farther out and maybe how to concretize, and, some of the programming.
Yeah, really, you're reading my mind because this summer I'm working on an AI course that faculty or students can take.
Right.
And it's self-paced and that will result in a certificate. And so they'll have badging along the way and then the certificate. So that'll start this fall. But as far as expanding, we'll continue to expand on our programming and our reach. So, we'll be working with, more and more of the community. Also, I've thought about having students, whether it's ambassadors or other students involved with more internships related to AI, which I see that expanding. So I think as people learn about what we're doing, we're going to be expanding pretty much everything full throttle. And then the same thing goes for professional development. I think education's everything right now. So the more we have, different perspectives and that kind of thing, the better. I was contacted again. People just keep coming, and asking how can they be involved. So the professional development schedule is filling up because we've got tons of people from even outside of PennWest that would like to do some trainings or would like to talk to faculty. So we'll do much more with that. I think at some point we'll probably outgrow our space. We have plans for grants for other robots, and my vision in the future is I want to have a museum. I want it to be something that, basically anyone can come and see And not just a regional museum, but a place where people can come and say, wow, they have like the humanoid robot that everybody's talking about. Let's drive to Edinburgh, Pennsylvania, right? And see what that looks like. But and along with that, I want to see more growth with our students and with our professors, and just being of service and helping others with it. Because I think, not everything about AI is wonderful. Some things are, we have to be cautious about, and I don't see that going away anytime soon. So,
That's great, and I love the really the vision and having the mission to reach out to faculty and students, because that really everybody is finding themselves having to grapple with some of the issues dealing with AI, and one of them, especially for faculty, is a concern that students are just kind of outsourcing their thinking. This is something you've written about and you've spoken a bit about, saying that maybe AI should be used more as a co-pilot instead of a replacement, and that you encourage students to not relinquish their critical thinking skills. How do you go about helping students and educators maintain their critical thinking skills while leveraging AI, and striking that right balance, both from a faculty perspective about how do they support student use while making sure students aren't over relying on it, and for students to know what's the proper level of use for AI in some of their work?
yeah, there was a recent article by MIT. I'm sure you guys saw it on cognitive offloading and what happens with our brains. And I definitely have a concern that if we're only using AI to write everything, what is that doing for our, intellectual ability and in terms of our skills? So I think it is important, and I think it's going to take more than just us as a center. It's going to take like a lot of different stakeholders to help people understand that being human involves writing, right? And that our human brain is valuable. And if all we ever do is ask robots to do our work for us, what does that mean for us as humans and making sense of the world and making meaning and, you know, doing things that, make us human and are inherently human. So yeah, I mean that's something as a director that I talk about with a lot of people, and my students laugh because I'll say this is an assignment, I want you to use your human brain. But then they know I'm going to scaffold it. Like they're going to write the thing with their human brain, and then they're going to have the opportunity to use AI to assist them. And so I think that where AI is the most powerful is in that co-pilot mode, where or just teaching assistant mode or whatever. You can call it whatever kind of assistant, depending on what it does. In that it can absolutely help us generate ideas. Although, like I say that, but then I still think that we need to generate ideas as humans too, right? Like that we're not outsourcing all the ideation with robots, but it can absolutely come up with things that we might not have thought of. Assistance, like I know I planned a trip and I had it help me with a trip plan. And I wanted it to calculate the mileage between each of the destinations. So I knew I was maximizing that time. Or like I just went to a conference where it was a ISTE conference. It was a massive conference, and I wanted to maximize like when I go to the socials after the sessions, if this one's like 15 miles away, right? I had it put together a schedule of like what would be the most efficient way to visit all these things. Not that I had time to do that, but so I think, if we can help our students maybe think about that piece. Like, how can we use that to help us to outsource tasks that are not necessarily something we want to spend a lot of time on, like calculating mileage? I mean, I'm sure someone out there just loves doing that. I don't love doing that. So if that frees me up to be able to write, like work on my book or work on something else, then that's okay. And I think we have to model that for our students. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the one way I think about it, it's kind of like working like with any intelligent entity, right? So I see a lot of these studies, like this MIT study, and there was a study about computer science students in Turkey, and they kind of basically, they did these studies and they found that when the students had the AI do all their work, they didn't learn anything, which to me was like, not remotely surprising. I kind of wondered, do we really need a study on that? If I asked Anand to do all my work, I probably wouldn't learn anything from doing my work, right? Whereas is if you kind of interact with another intelligent individual, right? And I ask you and Anand for some feedback on my work, and we have lunch and we share some ideas, right? And we work with that, and then maybe I have an assistant who, checks my citations, right? To me, that's like working in a positive way with another intelligent entity, to strengthen our intelligence. And I think and part of that then also comes back, why I like debate so much in terms of the assignments, right? You can't have the AI debate for you. You have to, you learn your material well enough to go up there and present it, right? And there's all other types of criteria. But I think, when you engage and you interact with the AI, that can be very valuable. And of course, I also just see like a work environment. You don't go to work and you say, well, I don't need to be creative because, Camille's really creative, so I'll leave all the creativity to her, and Anand, he's like really, he has a really high, logical thinking score, so I'll let him kind of think through and see if we have any problems, right? We all kind of interact and we all share our ideas together and we all work together. And it's like now we just kind of have the opportunity to work with a lot more people at a low cost. But one of the kind of other things I wanted to ask you is, what advice would you give to another university that was starting, right? And of course now, we've seen some places like New York. I mean, the state, they gave all this money to all these universities, right, to develop these programs, but other states and universities are obviously operating in very constrained, fiscal environments. So there's obviously the ideal, right? Like, if someone gives you a lot of money to start something, or maybe you're just kind of operating within uh, not many resources you have, or that you maybe even had to borrow from somewhere else. So I'm wondering what kind of advice you would give people to get something started, because the normal university planning process, it's too long, right? Like I think universities and K-12 environments, they need to have something kind of up and going, right? For the fall, maybe for the spring, some kind of something to at least get themselves started. And I'm wondering what advice you might give.
Maybe more bagel shop meetings. It sounds
Right.
Right, right. Yeah, I had somebody tell me recently, Camille, this grassroots effort that you have started, and I thought, grassroots, wait a minute. This grassroots effort is really going to pay off, and more universities should be thinking this way. Just starting with a vision, starting with a mission, and then building, and then involving stakeholders, right? So, I think the advice that I would give with that is, I don't think that you need a massive amount of money to start. I think what you need intellectual capital. You need people who are curious and who are on board with the vision and the mission, and who understand that this thing is really relevant and that they can be part of that. And I think if you have those people, because obviously it takes more than just me as a director, right? We have an incredible IT department. If you can get your IT department on board, start to reach out to different departments. And this having a hub doesn't hurt. I think having a place where people can reach out in a face, someone that they can reach out and just say, I have this idea, because that happens a lot. We had a professor who reached out and said, Camille, what if we created a chatbot for scheduling and for all these other, advising? And I said, I think that sounds amazing, So someone that can be a cheerleader, right, and help support things. So now it wasn't necessarily someone that knew a lot about them, so I knew I need to support them. But I think it's just a matter of holding that space, right? And someone needs to make the time, even if it's only one person, to support some of the other things that are happening. And so, and the other thing that I think is needed is, I know we're working closely with our grants department. So I think other advice is to kind of, to get that moving, somebody needs to read grant applications. Someone needs to, figure out real fast how to use AI to help them with that. And that's something I've been looking at, just to mine all the grants, right? Like, are these grants even appropriate to write? But I feel like all of that will come. But if you don't have the right people in place, and The other thing I think you don't need an expensive professional development plan, but you should have some kind of community. Like we have multiple communities. We have them in, AI ethics. We have AI research. Different topics. We also have other emerging technologies areas. We have people who are interested in the library and how AI works with the library services. So if the advice I would give for other universities is to start to think about how do you create mindful spaces, whatever those look like, to have conversations and allow those people that, the naysayers, allow them to be part of that. Allow the people who are running with it, like your super nasher techno flashers, like the the people that are way out and in front, let them kind of talk a little bit. So but yeah, just creating the spaces, I think, is the best advice I could give.
That's excellent advice. I think that really helps. You just got to get started with it. But one thing that you mentioned before that this makes me think of is that you do have those faculty and students and staff that are kind of ready to jump ahead, and then you have some others that are have pause for concern, and they're really worried about plagiarism. And you mentioned I think wanting to get over the plagiarism hump with AI. A lot of faculty that are viewing AI as a threat to education. How do you help those faculty and staff and maybe even some students get through that mindset shift, to get it to look at it in practice and to be able to move into thinking about collaborative uses?
Yeah, it's not easy when, you're living in a culture of fear, right? So I try to think about that and be mindful that no matter what's causing a person's fear, I don't know that I necessarily can do anything about it, but I can shine light on what the issue is. So I think reminding them that it's not going away usually helps, that this is something that is part of a greater shift with our culture and it's changing our profession, but that there are things that we can do to educate ourselves. And wouldn't we rather be in the know than have this thing roll over us, and there's everyone's using that quote about AI won't replace you, but someone who knows more about AI will. And so there are times I'll throw it into a presentation and I'll say, well, I'm not sure how I feel about this, but I'm going to throw it in. The plagiarism conversation, I think, is where we run when we're afraid, right? And in that, when I hear that in a discussion, it just tells me like somebody's dug their heels in because that's the thing they're fixated on. And I think when you realize that there's a lot more to the conversation than just plagiarism, and there are strategies that you can use to help people and students in particular with moving beyond that. Most people tend to be reasonable, but I think, I don't know, believe it or not, I've only had one conversation with a professor who dug his heels in and said, I'll never use it. Just one. Everybody else is, like that I can see anyway, is running with it. And then those that are quiet in the middle, I'm gonna choose to think that they're just watching and learning, right? So they're showing up. Like we have people that show up in our communities of practice and they don't say anything. They're just listening. And I think and I always thank them. I'm so glad you came. I'm so glad you came to listen and be part of the group. Thank you for that. But yeah, I usually the plagiarism conversation it's a red flag for me. Like I know, oh, I need to spend more time with this person so that we're not just thinking, students are all doing this thing, right? And the challenge is if we don't do anything, then your worst fear could happen, right? So it's sort of like this weird I don't know, this weird thing. So I just try to help them with there are strategies and one of them is having a policy in your syllabus. So some people struggle. They're like, well, I just tell them they can't use it. Okay, but did you put, like what level of usage can you do? Because are you going to mandate like a Google search? Because we can't do that. Like, so what does that policy look like? And I have had professors ask me to share examples of policies that are, like green light, red light, yellow light, or, the levels. So, which I think is good. I think they're also trying to figure out what they need to do. And then mostly I tell them involve your students. talk to your students about it, because people assume that students are all using AI to write their papers. There's a lot of critical students that are like, I don't know about this AI thing. I don't know that I want to use it. So that's a whole other area. Yeah.
All right. So, as we get kind of close here to wrapping up, I wondered if there's just kind of one you wanted to leave, all the listeners with one thought, the thing you thought was most important, right? To either do or understand about AI and, other emerging technologies. Some people call it the elevator pitch, right? If you're in the elevator and you have a chance to tell somebody, if, the provost hadn't reached out to you, but you're in the elevator with the provost and, you were kind of and been the opposite had been the case, right? That the university wasn't doing much with AI, and you really wanted the university to act. What might you say?
Yeah, I think the thing that I would say to anyone is that you need to learn as much about this as you can. And the reason for that is, like I said, I talked about the shift, this whole shift towards virtualized ways of knowing. And you don't want to be in the dark. I mean, it's like I said, it is the biggest shift, and it's going to impact everyone around you. So even if you don't think it's going to impact you, it's going to impact everybody around you, and it's important. There's a lot of things, both pros and cons that are incredibly important. I mean, with AI running, nuclear power plants, and by the way, it is running the Mile Island plant that they reopened. So with the environmental impacts, with the ways in which, like teachers are using it to write lesson plans and create other things. I mean, there are lots of examples of how it's revolutionizing our culture. And just like the Industrial Revolution, when light was invented, I have a hard time imagining anybody not wanting to use the light bulb. So at some point, whether, it's now or next year or the year after that, I would hope everyone would be engaged with it at some point, not just because they're just excited about it, because it's relevant and it's important and it's changing. It's a game changer.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Anna, did you have any?
No, I was just going to say, Dr. Dempsey, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today, and congratulations on the new center. It really sounds like you're doing some innovative work, and the students and the community are really going to benefit from it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.